public comments. Okay, we can get to the general overview of the HR structure and functions, which is generalized. This kind of got set up because there was a little flurry that HR was covered by any committee.
Okay.
It's actually covered by this committee.
Okay. Well, I think we can make this pretty easy. If you look at the organizational chart in front of you, that's pretty much the structure of HR. And when I think about HR, I think of it as in chunks, a big picture and all its chunks put together. And it's pretty much outlined by each one of the columns you see, with the first one being Human Resource Officer, and that's Mr. Crawford. He is the systems person. He manages all of our systems. He also manages all of the classified staff. He does all of the salaries, all our salary calculations. He does all of our demographics and all our data collection. So that's in his office. And under him, you will see he has classified staff that he delegates out those particular assignments to. The only two people under there that's not in direct contact with HR per se would be the courier, which is Cliff, and he's out and about every day, and then Tanger, who sits at the front desk. So they're not directly involved in HR functions, but they are grouped into HR. Then your second line is the student services. That chunk was recently added to our portfolio this year with restructuring of the district office. Because before we did not have student services, we didn't coordinate nurses, and we did not do behavior management specialists, and we didn't have the task of trying to keep up with all of the admin that goes along with the director and another group of staff. Then your next chunk is the director of personnel, and that's Reggie Dees. He handles all the accreditation, evaluating teachers, making sure teachers are certified when we hire them. And he also supervises the hiring process, making sure everyone that comes through properly vetted before we send them out into the schools. Then your next chunk is mentors. We have 4 lead mentors that we dispatch from the HR office to support mainly induction teachers, but we also bring on board those teachers that are struggling with performance issues. So we assign those 4 people, no direct functions of HR, but are in the buildings every day. So they directly work with teachers and administrators at the building level to support new teachers and struggling teachers. And then risk managers, the last chunk, and Jennifer does the insurance piece. She also takes care of the FOIA, and she also does for us the workers' comp. So that's her piece. And then you have the HR facilitator, that gets into the management of actually running the HR office and making sure all documents are legal, properly filed. Then Angie, the manager, does all of our office support, like spending, budget, ordering, keeping everyone in compliance with anything they need to order, have approvals. She gets all the HR approvals. And then our last 3 people are benefit specialists, and they manage benefits for all almost 3,000 employees. So that's the structure. I'm a systems person, so I manage from a systems standpoint. Everything has to have a system. We have to stay within the system. We have to follow the protocols. We have to follow the guidelines. HR can be difficult if you don't manage from being in black and white. And if you're outside of black and white, you have to have a very good rationale for being outside of those lines. So it's follow the rules, stay in the process, so that we can stay in compliance with the laws and employees are protected. And I'll answer any questions you have.
I have one question. How do the lead mentor teachers and the instructional coaches interact? Do they have a different assignment, so to speak, or?
They do, because the lead mentor teachers have a group of teachers that they are solely responsible for, first and foremost, and that's the induction teachers. Those are the 120 to 135 brand new teachers right out of college that we hire every year. So that's their first and foremost goal. They're in the buildings with them, they support them, and they work through the instructional coaches to make sure what they are training them on is correct, and it's a mandate through ISD. Yes, ma'am.
Could you help me understand what the difference between an HR manager and the human resources officer is, and the director of personnel? Maybe it's just the nomenclature that's confusing me, but
Okay. The director of personnel works solely with certified staff. So if I'm a certified staff person, the person that works with me to make sure my certification is in line, I'm properly evaluated, must be a certified staff person. So the HR director manages that. The HR facilitator is someone who facilitates what the personnel manager and the personnel officer needs done in terms of hiring and making sure all documents are where they need to be and tracking those kinds of pieces of information down. An example, the HR director is responsible for the accreditation of schools based on certified positions that are allocated for those schools. So he must make sure that any teacher we have in a position is certified for that position. And he needs to understand the state laws, the state guidelines, in order to make sure that happens. And if it doesn't happen, he needs to be able to communicate with that staff what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and what happens if it doesn't happen.
and that's a full-time job.
Full-time and a half job.
Okay. Who's responsible for classified staff? You said that Reggie Diaz is responsible for certified staff. Who's responsible for classified staff?
Dale Crawford.
Huh?
Dale Crawford.
Human Resources Officer.
Yes. Yes. And Dale is an officer because he manages this classified staff as well as all of our systems in HR.
Okay.
He does he's working on a big project now, our electronic filing. We're trying to get rid of all paper files. So Dale manages that. He works with communicating our systems, HR systems, with the finance systems. And he actually does salaries.
Okay. There's no solid line between these first two columns and you. Does Crawford report to you?
Yes.
And
he
everybody
does.
else to Crawford?
Crawford reports to me, and everybody under him reports to him.
Okay. So Kiki Swinton reports to you also?
She reports to Crawford.
Okay, all right. So we're just missing a solid line between
Yeah.
Crawford and you? Okay, good.
That's it.
All right, just wanted to clear that up. What are the goals of each person?
My directive for them this year was to look at their job responsibilities and come back with a goal that would make their job more efficient based on where we see HR going in the next 3 years. And that is total paperless.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So what are the challenges that you have in meeting that goal?
Time. Just really, I think it's really time. We do a lot. We're very lean in terms of staffing in HR. Sure, we could have another 3 people in HR, but we've done an excellent job of managing our lean staff. Because my belief is everyone in HR needs to be cross-trained. Everyone backs everyone else up. If one of these people don't come to work tomorrow, someone in that line can take up where they left off. So we have to do what our goals are based on the number of staff people that we have. And I have not planned in anywhere to add additional staff. Maybe it might get me to a point where I can't do it without additional staff, but we're gonna try this first.
That's an interesting point that you brought up about backup. Who's in charge when somebody isn't there? And as the HR manager, the HR director, are you trying to instill that throughout the whole district? Because I had a couple of issues presented to me by constituents last year where they were trying to get something done, and the sped director was out of town for a week, and progress ground to a halt. So is that something that you're trying to instill across the board throughout the district, that everybody has a backup? And if they're not there, somebody is there to handle issues, problems, and make decisions?
Well, I am trying to incorporate that. Because I've had questions from other departments about the functionality of HR and how it functions the way it does. And my response is because we cover for each other. And you have to have that cover piece, because if I get sick one day, somebody's gonna need to be able to run with it. And it works for us, and I think it's a model for other departments. And I think it's slowly catching on.
Okay, so who do you think would be responsible for
Mandating
a
that.
district-wide effort around that everybody will have a backup?
That would be mine.
Who is your backup?
Well, I have 3. Dale Crawford steps in first, Reggie D steps in second, and then Jill McGann steps in third.
All right, so in the succession plan, Dale Crawford is actually the number one.
Absolutely. And if you and you talk about succession plan, we are, every time we have a position that's open in anything that we do in HR, always includes the word succession, because we want to fill the positions, but we want to fill the position with someone who can step up and take over if someone leaves. Because when you have an older staff, you got to have someone trained, because one person can't have all of the knowledge. And that's, we work real hard to do that here.
You anticipated exactly where I was trying to go. It always needs succession plans. Previously, we didn't have them sometimes. And we always need, everybody needs a succession. You know.
I agree, I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, we're gonna press for that, I'm sure.
You know?
So that we never miss a step, and that you're training the person that can take your spot.
That's correct.
It may sound corny, but I've worked in a couple of large and small organizations where it was ingrained in everybody's head, you are training your replacement.
Absolutely.
If you're not training your replacement, you're not doing your job.
Absolutely. And for me in HR, the information that we have is so critical that you have to train someone to take over. Dale Crawford, for an instance, he's been in HR for 15 years. For 15 years, and he knows the HR data back and forth. He can quote anything you want him to. He has binders galore, telling you who's where, how long they've been there, what position they're in. Well then, one day it dawned on me, if he ever left, we'd be in a bad position. So herein lies
I like the
the
way you cleaned that
specialist. The specialist, he's training those ladies to take over. He's explaining the data, they know what systems. In fact, he's out this week because his father passed away. And we haven't missed a week.
You mentioned going paperless in 3 years, right? What's the benefit to that? I know it sounds like a stupid question, but I'd like to hear what the department views as the benefit of going paperless.
Ease of access for files.
Mhm.
The least likelihood of papers getting lost. Because once we bring an employee in, when we get the documents out of their hands, we automatically scan it into their file. So there's no misplacing documents. Principals can't access, supervisors can have access to those files, as well as employees can have access to those files. So it's not that we keep them all locked up in a room like we do now, and we have to by law. But if they're wireless or paperless, then we have the ability to control who sees what. We are the super users in HR, but then there are parts of the file that a principal might need to see, or part of a file that a hiring manager might need to see. And then there's parts of the file that an employee needs to see. So they don't have to take time off to come to HR and set up an appointment, so that they can go in a room with a closed door, and when our staff people have to sit there with them for 30 or 40 minutes while they go through it.
Mhm.
So it's time consuming and it's more efficient.
Okay. So you're running lean now, and it's an ambitious project to be ready in 3 years. It's basically digitizing paperwork, which is correct. So without correcting, without making any permanent places in the head count, could some temps be hired to scan stuff?
Well, yes, they could be.
Would that alleviate the situation? And then when it's done, you wouldn't be stuck with people that you don't need anymore?
Correct, correct. And I think that's one of the things that Dale has planned in terms of once we get ready to start scanning, because files are set up. And now we have to go through all the files that we have in the file room and scan. He has 2 people that he wants to bring in part-time temporary to do the scan.
All right, last question. Will you be scanning historically, or will you be scanning just current employees?
Historically. One of the suggestions that was made by the company that we are working the system through was you take your old files and let them just kind of die out, and you scan your new files, and then that builds your system going forward. But we said, no, we wanted to do historical. We'll put all files in and forget about not scanning, so.
Thank you.
How extensive is talent acquisition? What does that entail?
How extensive?
Yeah, it's entail.
It's,
Every certified member, every classified member, or both? Yeah.
no, it's certified. She looks for certified talent, teachers. That's her position. She is out combing the country for teachers. She brings the teachers back. She helps place the teachers based on the needs of the principal. She works directly with principals. In fact, on Tuesdays, we have I guess it's a staffing session set up. It's me, talent acquisition person, Reggie Dees, and Dale Crawford. And we look at where all of our vacancies are across the district, and we call every principal to talk about those vacancies and who's gonna fill those vacancies. At that point, the talent acquisition person says, I have 2 applicants, I'm gonna send you those applicants, interview them, let me know what you think. If it's not a fit, I will route them to another school. So she's actively involved in filling vacant positions.
Yeah, I mean, how does that fit into the overall plan of all of those administrators you're talking about? Every administrator that needs someone, and that you have someone to offer that's talented, but they don't have any, do they have interviews to find out whether that's talent in my estimation? I'm not sure, let's say. And you got someone you got named as a possible fill, but I want to know whether it's a fill for my plan, and how do I vet that person?
Okay, so we don't automatically place teachers in a building. We have a portal, AppleTrack, that houses all applicants that have applied, and we use you as principal, apply for your position. So you have a math position open. You're gonna have a position number for that one position. And talent is going to apply for your one position. You have access to all of those people that have applied for your position. You can scan their resumes, you can look at their application. Then you call and schedule interviews that you bring into your building with your administrative staff to interview that possible candidate, make the choice. And what we tell principals is they don't make offers for positions on HR. They will say at that point, if you found someone, I'm going to make a recommendation to HR for you in this position. And at that point, we take over to make sure that they are vetted further than what they are in that application system. Then we call and actually offer that position. We don't cut the principals out. We don't, sometimes I wish we could, just go get staff and just place them in the building, and we wouldn't have as many vacancies, but we don't do that because principals are going to be responsible for outcomes in their building, and they have to have people that they feel comfortable that can do that for them. So we just manage it from afar to make sure that those people are vetted. So, yes, that, and if we're at the table and a principal has an opening, then Jill says, just got a new applicant in, because she knows whatever a new applicant pings in, she looks at the applicant and looks at the position.
Now, the question be how does that coordinate with the academics and resources and other, part of the administrative staff in terms of our overall philosophy and agenda, the board's agenda, is there a coordination there? I mean, I actually specific about it. I mean, let's say we're trying to build a athletic program that, at some school, and, no one else is really interested in that, but that's our agenda. We want athletes to be the forefront of what we're trying to do. How does that coordinate what you do and the school administrators do and academics?
So we find the bodies to put in those positions. Our role is to make sure that person is certified, has been evaluated, has a valid certificate, and can go in the classroom. And then it's left up to the principal at that point to say, this person will fit in my building because these are my needs based on what's dispatched down from instructional services. If we're looking for coaches, same principle applies. If principals are looking for teaching coaches, what we have to make sure is you might be a good coach, but you might not necessarily be a good teacher.
How did you do that? That's my question. That's my question. How do you do it, and how does your philosophy interface with the academics, the instructional, in terms of what is a good teacher and what is not? And that's my point. I mean, are we coordinating that thought process?
Yes,
Yeah.
because teachers have to be qualified. And in order for us to prove that they're qualified, we have to look at their past history, where they've come from. So it is mandated by every principal that they must speak with their last supervisor. We're going to look at their history. We're going to look at their certification and evaluation history in HR. But the principal at that point must look at references. Each applicant has 3 reference surveys, and then we require each principal to physically speak with their last supervisor.
I guess another way of asking a question is, how do your lead mentor teacher interface with our instructional division?
They work very closely. When our new teachers come in, we put together a 3-day orientation for brand new teachers. We include the instructional services department to come and talk about initiatives from ISD, what's required, what the expectations are. We even bring those new teachers in with a binder with standards so that we help them know where their standards are and help them begin to unpack those standards. So once they get to ISD, part of that's already done. They have that before they even walk into the building.
Is there any department communication in terms of what you tell them and what what the instructional department wants to tell them?
Well, the mentors and the coordinators have to be on the same page. The mentors do not disseminate any information that has not been vetted from ISD, because we don't want to train new teachers and then have to unlearn something that we've trained them and it doesn't matter to ISD.
Right.
So we're all in communications before we give out the first piece of information.
We get a top prospect in, math teacher, every principal wants him. We don't have a draft, because I know we don't have a draft system.
Sorry.
So, yeah, how do we determine? Now, I know in the future, we may be targeting certain schools, but I don't think we do that now, or do we?
We do.
We do?
We do.
We say, you're a priority school because of
Absolutely.
the ones that were identified last year.
Talent acquisition person, look for experienced teachers to go to those high priority schools. We try to steer induction teachers away from those schools. Now, we might get to the end of the day and that's all we have left, our induction teachers, but we put them there with a lot of support, and that means the district mentor goes and manages that. We get a great math candidate in, and because our system is set up that applicants apply for the school that they want to teach in, we try to encourage principals, and it's a constant struggle, right, Reggie, to stay out of someone else's building looking for teachers. And every now and then we might get a great candidate that we have 2 principals fighting on, because one principal has interviewed, done the background work, called the reference, and made a recommendation to HR to hire that person. Well, the second principal kind of skipped over some steps, and they've told the great math teacher, I want you, and they put in a rec to hire before they've done all the background work. So then we have 2 rec to hires and 1 great math teacher. So then the fight begins. I had them first, checked the timestamp, I put them in first. Well, when it gets to that big of a battle, then we go directly to that math teacher. Where do you go?
There's where void is in my mind. The void is that we at the top don't know where that math teacher needs to go, and we ought to be. Should be our goal, not where he wants to go, but where he needs to go to better fix both situations.
We know where they need to go, but then you get into the situation to say, I have a job for you, and the only place you can be is at this school. So do we do that? And then that applicant says, well, I don't want to be there, I'm not going to come to the district.
I mean, no, I mean out of the two schools, if you get down to those.
Yeah, but you might be in a situation where that candidate says, well, I'm gonna make this up, right? But they might say, well, here are my two options, and you're telling me I have to go here right now. Well, then I'm gonna go to Savannah 30 minutes down the road and teach in Savannah, right? So I don't want us to lose individuals and then end up with extra vacancies, but we have to come up with a way to get our teachers into, our great candidates, into the schools where we need them, you know? And that's the challenge in balancing that, because we need to get them in the right place.
Yeah,
We need to get them where we need
my
them.
mind is if you get them down to two places, and both obviously have been vetted to a degree, because this principal's not gonna say, I'm putting in for this guy unless
Yeah.
there's been some communication.
Yep,
And the other one hadn't researched it and
Doesn't
also
work.
put in for him, there's some communication with both. I mean, if it gets down to that kind
Yeah.
of narrowing, where we got two schools, then we want you here
yeah,
out of the two schools. I mean, or else, you know, the other principal never should have had a conversation with you.
That's the
that's
issue.
it.
That's the issue.
Yeah, well,
That and that.
That's the issue.
So you think if you change,
So,
I've got
so
time.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
We've been concentrating on employment. I got one last employment question, and I'd like to move to human relations, okay? It's been mentioned to me a couple of times that the window for applying for internal positions closes before a lot of positions are made known. How do we deal with that?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The window to apply for internal transfers
Okay.
closes prior to the time of year when most vacancies are realized. So how do we do it?
The window for internal transfers opens April 1,
Right,
closes May 1. It's a
Right.
good solid 4 weeks. Lots of positions are open. And we do it that way because if we allow transfers to continue throughout the entire hiring season, we will never get schools filled. Because I am at a school that I want to leave, and I'm going to wait until the position comes open, and then I'm going to transfer and go south of the Broad. And then I've left a school north of the Broad with hole in it. So you have to have some controls over movement within the system so principals can get a grasp on how many positions they're going to have available. Because it's hard enough to fill positions at the last minute for resignations, but if we have staff hopping from one school to the next across the board, we would never close out.
all right, hypothetically, you got a person working whose career path plans are to get into administration. After May 1, an administrator quits. That person theoretically cannot apply for that,
Yes, they can.
okay?
Because, yes, they can. If you are going to move, it has to be for a promotion. If you're going to get a promotion or go into a higher position, then you can go. We don't hold you back. That transfer window doesn't apply. It applies for positions that are lateral.
Okay, good, thank you. Now, how do you delineate responsibility between all these directors and the principals in the two opposing forces of central HR and site-based management? Do you monitor the decisions that principals make regarding human relations issues?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
is it just if it's a complaint that makes it your way, then you get involved? Or how do you work it out with the principals on who decides what regarding personnel issues?
We have clear expectations from HR as
I'm sorry?
we have clear expectations from HR in regards to principals. Principals don't make HR decisions based on a site. We have standard rules and processes that they must follow. So it's not, if it happens in this building, we'll handle it one way. And if it happens in that building, we'll handle it another way. Systems and processes are in place to deal with personnel. And that has to be followed by principals. They can't change those rules.
So there's no discretion?
Should not be any discretion.
Should not be in discretion?
Should not be any discretion. That's
So
right.
how do you root it out if there is?
We are pretty open with staff, teachers,
Mhm.
and HR is open. They can come, call anytime they want to. And Mr. Dees is the person that takes all the hits for that. If they feel that they're being unfairly treated, they call him.
That was the answer I was hoping for. Thank you.
Or
You mentioned about the principals, two principals fighting for a teacher. Do you think maybe change the process, get the principal out of the way, and have an interviewing team that don't have any connection to any schools, or any principals?
Well, we can't really do that because then we take the responsibility of staff away from the principal. Because if that staff person, or that teacher that was hired, is not quite up to par, the first thing the principal can say, I didn't hire, you gave it to me.
I think we want the accountability,
Yeah.
right, for performance, throughout the chain, right? So anybody, the district department here, right, for example, if they hire someone, you know, and that's who they want, you know, then they're responsible for making sure that person is successful. Right? And I think that's the kind of accountability that we want to build into it all the way through. Because the first thing the principal's going to turn around and say is, I know the kids didn't perform well, I know we didn't get the results we were hoping for, but, you know, you gave me that person.
Alice gave it.
Right.
It's Alice's fault.
Yeah, but that goes back to my point.
Yeah.
I mean, unless our philosophy is one and the same, then yes, they can say that. But they can't say that if our philosophy is one and the same. I mean, what do the larger districts do? I mean,
So we,
the big cities don't ask the principal whether they want that guy or not. They send you to that school and then they monitor that. And that I'm saying, I don't say we want to do that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we're not that big.
Right.
But I'm saying there got to be some kind of coordination between what we're seeing as the lead teachers and the instructional teachers, what we're seeing from our perspective, the district perspective, the
Yeah.
administrative perspective, and what's really going on. We can't let the whole school fall because the principal has got a different mindset than we have. Got to have the same mindset.
So I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage in this conversation because I haven't seen it play out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, what you may have seen play out, I haven't seen it.
Now,
play
yeah,
out,
I'm not
right?
speaking from any
Yeah,
particular point.
so, but I know, the district that I came from, the principals hired their staff, right? HR, seems like a similar process. HR checked to make sure that candidates met the credentials that they needed to make, you know, and then they recommended who they wanted to hire. And, you know, and we had some battles and people finding people in somebody else's shop and school and that sort of stuff, and we had challenges around that.
So we're not gonna have any HR rules that are gonna help us reverse the thing that Herb showed us, where we had high turnover in the target schools. They had the lowest tenure in the target schools. I mean, you know the problem I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, because the hotshot #1 prospect math teacher would rather teach
Absolutely.
somewhere else.
So those schools are gonna have extra incentives. Those schools are going to have to be treated differently. Because we already know out of the box, you're not gonna go there if you don't have to go there. So those schools have to be treated differently in terms of staffing, compensation for being there, and expectations as a district for those teachers and staff in that building.
That's your job. Okay.
That's the answer. I wanna hear it.
So where are we on that? Okay, developing incentives, things like that, where are we?
Okay, you've been here
We're
a
waiting
week.
for, Dr. Rodriguez to.
No, oh, I'm asking Alice, I'm not asking you, I'm asking Alice, because we've known about this for a while.
We're not anywhere, because the first thing we looked at is funding. Can we fund it? One of the things that we thought about doing last year when we got the SEER grant was to set up travel reimbursement. We could get teachers from north abroad, south abroad to travel. We would pay them for travel, give them an extra stipend. But then you have to decide what is an extra stipend and how do you make that work? How do you make it worthwhile? And then you have to have leaders in those buildings that are on the same page as everybody else. This is going to be a reconstitution of this building, so everything has to change. And we didn't make any steps forward because funding was uncertain. We were waiting for Dr. Rodriguez to get here so we could talk about his goals and his philosophy and how he would support us doing that. But once we get a clear go-ahead, then we can put a plan together, because we do have to deal with that situation differently.
You might want to make a note to have somebody check. The last time I looked at it, the IRS would not allow people to be paid reimbursed mileage for commuting to work.
Do it in Charleston.
In,
They do it in Charleston
in-
right now currently.
Huh?
They currently have that in Charleston. They have it in place in Charleston where they pay their staff members to travel. If they
Oh,
travel
okay,
to
then let's
Title
change the rule, that's good.
So I don't think they call it pay for miles.
It's not
Mileage is
mileage.
stipend.
Yeah.
So travel,
Yes.
travel
Yeah.
reimbursement.
Mhm.
Travel.
Yeah.
salary
Yeah.
benefit.
So the ball's in your court.
I understand.
Yes and no, because, I mean, but she pointed out a very important thing that compensation is gonna be, that's where the buck stops. And that's in our court. We gotta be willing to support that. And now, and I suggest, leave them with some kind of leeway in terms of how you can, what you bring to us as a plan.
As a proposal.
And, yeah, and, my one thing about that is, if I'm a star teacher, and you're asking me to move to a place that's fairly uncomfortable, but if I'm a star, I wanna go just to make some differences. Teacher wants to make differences. You've gotta tie them in for more than a short period of time.
So I will share with you that we went through a program in Palm Beach that we had in place at one time, right? And what it did was, it was designed to try to attract teachers who had demonstrated high performance, right, to some of our lower performing schools. There was a $10,000 bonus that was paid to each of those teachers, okay? The problem came in that teachers who were already at that school didn't get that bonus, right? So now you have somebody coming in, okay, who's getting a $10,000 bonus to do the same job that you've been doing for 5 or 6 years, but, right? And in doing that, it destroyed the culture of the school. It destroyed the culture of the school, and actually, it did not achieve the desired outcome because it destroyed the culture of the school. So realistically, that has to be kept in mind in a proposal. That is it going to be about anybody who's at the school versus? So that's some direction
Hopefully it's
that
gonna
we would
be
need from the
everybody.
board on that.
Because I hope it's gonna be tied into the academic progress of the individual student in those people's class. I mean, you could be a star coming in, but if your numbers don't show it 4 or 5 years down the road, then you're not entitled to star pay. And if you're not a star and your numbers all of a sudden because teachers get better, particularly some teachers who, you know, we might brand as not prepared, and then all of a sudden, they understand what's really going on in terms of educating, and they get better. And the teachers, like you say, frozen at where they were. So I hope it's tied into to numbers, to results.
For the whole team.
Yes, results for the whole
Bringing a
team.
star in
And-
has to lift the whole team, and the whole
Yes.
team has to win the championship together.
Yes.
That's the only way it works.
Yeah.
Current plan is to deliver a new policy manual at the end of August. And historically, when that happens, each department does a sanity check that all their administrative regulations support any changes, or all policies, but check for what changed that might require a change in administrative regulations. Has there been any talk about doing that, getting ready to do that, or?
In terms of our HR's firm.
Yeah,
Yes, in fact, and I said earlier, I'm a systems person, so rules and procedures must always follow policies. And policies from our ARs come directly from board policies, so we can make sure we're carrying out what the board's mandates are for the district. So we look at the board policies and incorporate in our ARs.
so you've warned somebody that a new manual's coming
Oh,
up?
yes.
Okay, great.
Anything else? We have future agenda. Thank you. Future topics for, first, we need to decide, do we continue to have separate operations and HR meetings? Or do we glom them back together? I think this is the first thing, probably should wait for Will to, so that we can have all three of us make that decision. So I'll send an email out.
So can we have that as an agenda item for the next meeting? Just to
We certainly
fold
can.
the two into each other?
I'm gonna try to get a consensus in an email, but we'll put it on the next thing, no.
Eventually, though, of course, one of the unintended consequences of having a three-person committee is that it may get more frequent that there's only two there, and the work of the committee can't die for lack of, we still have a quorum with two people.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna get Will's feedback. So the regular operations committee is set up for the second Wednesday. Look, why don't we keep it like that, and then we can split. Part of that meeting is operations, part of that is HR. Try that for the next time.
So
Not this week, but in
Right,
August.
in August. Because we already have this Wednesday, so.
you want a motion for that?
I think we can agree, can't we?
Yeah, I agree.
We agree. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we're
Move to
adjourned.
adjourn.
That's a good move.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Mark,
You answered
Everything you
some
all
questions
wanted
we
to ask
didn't know to
HR.
ask.
Well, going from the